Good morning. Well, yes, still morning, everyone. Welcome. We're glad you're here. We're going to wait for Jack McCoy to join us. And
Hello,
he's going to be my chat box man. Everyone was automatically muted upon entry to the meeting. So if you're trying to unmute yourself and you can't, don't be distressed.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Sharon.
My cat is here right now. I don't know if she will stay, but she should enjoy the aquarium.
All right, if you were not automatically muted, I'm seeing that there are some folks who are not automatically muted. I'm going to go ahead and mute you, not because I don't love you. It's so that it doesn't get too confusing.
That's okay.
Some of them are working. If you're just arriving, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Tennessee Aquarium. Wit and Wisdom. I hope someday to belong to a senior group with such a good name as that. Scott Faust, I see your phone number on here. I've asked you to unmute if you can. There's Jack. Whoa. You keep.
I hit unmute.
Hey, hang on just a minute and let me get you unmuted.
Thank you. I'm unmuted, Julia.
Thank you, Jack. I'm glad to see you.
I don't know where you're gonna get it.
All righty. I'm going to mute a few folks who weren't for some reason automatically muted. Please don't anybody take that personally. It's just to cut down on the confusion and feedback. There, you're with us too, aren't you, Scott, excuse me.
Yeah.
Come on. I have folks who need to come into this room and work with animals, and they're very shy. The people, not the animals. So you may hear me encouraging them to come on and do what they need to do while we're having our program. All right, George Thurmond, I'm going to mute you, please, sir. There. I've got my two co-conspirators not muted, Scott Faust, who is cleverly disguised as his wife.
Yes, thank you so much. Good to meet you.
And Jack McCoy, who's been a tremendous help to me preparing this program.
Flattery will get you everywhere, Julia.
All right, well, I've lost my screen, so let me work on getting y'all back. That was a silly thing to do. Don't do that. All righty, we'll start in 2 minutes. So everybody get your sandwich. Make your last trip to the restroom.
I wish.
When I do Zoom calls with my sisters, we crate the dogs so there won't be interruptions. All right, there's someone with us named Kathy, who appears not to have any video. Kathy, I'm going to get you to unmute long enough to make sure you have what you need. Are you there? You have to unmute yourself. I've given you permission, so you can do that if you want to. And if you need to, you don't need to talk to me. You need to talk to Jack. And he'll tell you what to do to get video if you want it, because you don't appear to have it right now.
You'll have to unmute first.
All right, I'll go back and check on her. We're adding folks to the call, so you all keep shifting around. Wheeler, I'm going to mute you. Please don't take it personally. Okay, Kathy, if you decide that listening isn't good enough and you want video, I've asked you to unmute. I'll ask you one more time.
What you to mute or unmute? Kathy. Kathy.
She's unmuted apparently.
Jack.
Okay, Harold Ritchie and Grace Bartonfield appear not to have video either. Yours is there, but it's slashed out. You need to look on your bottom toolbar and you'll find a little video icon that is slashed out. If you'll click on it, it will turn into a not slashed out video icon and you'll be able to see as well as to hear, unless you just can't bear it. Okay. Nancy, I'm going to mute you.
You need to go upstairs. I can't hear you. Are you muted?
All right, Kathy, have you gotten the help that you need to get video? Jack, I can't hear Kathy talking to me either. She appears to be unmuted at this point.
Yeah. We don't know it is, and they're not talking.
Okay. Well, they're very quiet. I'll leave her unmuted unless I need to change that. All righty, it looks like everything is shipshape in Bristol fashion.
Betsy and Joanne are here. Can you hear us?
We can. We
Okay.
shouldn't be able to.
Oh, why unmuted us?
Oh,
Okay, so I should have made Jack.
Jack, you're muted. It says to talking. Ask if he can hear you. Jack, can you hear me?
You got the bad sound again.
Done that all day yesterday. Sounding, Jack, can you tell?
No, you're distorted like you were the last time.
Is this better?
No.
Okay. Get a little.
Scott, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay. Scott, you can always, if you can't get your sound issue resolved, you can always use the chat box. Everybody else is going to. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to begin, and I thank you for your punctuality, and so I'm going to try to begin on time. Just in case it's your first Zoom call, or perhaps you haven't been introduced to all of the bells and whistles that Zoom provides, I'd like to show you those. My name is Julia Gregory. I'm a senior educator here at the Tennessee Aquarium, and pleased and privileged to be giving you this virtual tour of our aquarium. So first of all, I'd like to teach you how to walk here. If you will run your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, a toolbar will appear. It will have important tools. The one probably farthest to the left is a microphone where you might be able to mute and unmute yourself. I asked Zoom to mute you all automatically upon entry so that we could hear clearly when one person talked. We will ask you to stay muted, and instead of talking to us, use the chat box. In that same toolbar, a few spaces over to your right, you see a bubble and it says chat. If you click on that, it will appear at the bottom of your right-hand window. And you'll be, whatever you type in there at the bottom will appear. Now you have to be very careful, because right now that little window says to everyone, and that means everyone on this call. So if you want to send a private message to someone else on this call, then you need to do that by clicking on the arrow in the to box, and you'll get a drop-down list of everybody on the call. And you can send messages privately to one person. If you want to simply ask a question, and we're going to ask you to use the chat box to ask questions, then just type it into everyone. Now, Jack McCoy, who appears as Robert McCoy here today, I understand that's because they found out about that time in Guadalajara. He's going to watch the chat box for me, and he's going to feed me your questions. I'll pause periodically to see if there's some questions I need to answer, or if something's just really, really pertinent to what we're seeing at the time, Jack will stop me and I won't be mad, and we'll answer that question. So, does anybody have a question to go in the chat box before we begin? And Jack, do you think I've covered everything?
Julia, I think so.
All right. Well, I am going to, for the most part, I'm going to show you some videos that I've shot here at the aquarium, and I'll just talk over them. Now, sometimes I'll stop them or I'll run them back to make sure you got to see a particular thing. And I'll use my cursor, my little white arrow, to show you what I want to make sure that you see. All righty, Jack, is that showing properly?
No, ma'am, I'm sorry, it's not.
Okay,
The good old screen share.
let me figure out what I did wrong. I'm sure it's me. Bump this puppy up. No, 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 don't do that.
You need to reboot.
No, I'm fine. I'm just having a little trouble getting to my share screen icon. There it is. Now it should show, yes?
Yes.
All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tennessee Aquarium. What you're seeing now is our original building that opened in May of 1992. We call it the River Journey Building, and now it truly is a freshwater building. If you'd like tickets to visit us, here's our ticketing venue under the blue canopies. I'm going to show you some, and I'm going to pause this so that you can see it. Here are our current ticket prices. Don't read the top line first, it's scary, because that's the aquarium and IMAX combo. It boils down to an adult ticket to the aquarium is $35, and children 3 to 12 are $22. Children under 3 are free. And then there are all kinds of packages and combos that are available. They're online. And right now, we are asking you, if it's at all possible and comfortable for you, to please buy your tickets online before you come. If you just find yourself in Chattanooga, oh, I'm lost. Look, I'm in Chattanooga. I'd like to go to the aquarium. We do have these sandwich boards with instructions about how to go in online and buy your tickets. So you have touch-free ticketing, and those will appear as barcodes on your phone. If you come to us individually, we'll ask you to go to that building first, to the River Journey building. But since you're with me today, we're going to break the rules, and we're going to go to the Ocean Journey building first. And actually, we're going to spend most of our time there because that seems to be the building that interests people the most. It's just across the plaza from the other building, a teeny little short walk. The plaza is a public park. It's a city park, but we recently won the contract to maintain it since we were getting blamed for everything that was wrong with it anyway. We decided that maybe we should be taking care of it, and now we do. So here we enter the Ocean Journey building, and the escalator ride to the top was just too dull. But in both of our, to show you on video, but in both of our buildings, our modus operandi is to take you up an escalator or two to the very top of the building. And then if you walk always forward and never go back somewhere you've already been, you spiral your way down that building and get to see everything there. So let's go to the top of the Ocean Journey building and see one of our very most popular exhibits, which is a touch tank. The water here is very shallow, and you may reach in your hands, and with 2 gentle fingers, like the ones I'm holding up here, you may touch the fish on top of their backs. And it's safe. Here, let me start to run it again. It's safe because all of these fish have their mouths very low on their bodies. This is an epaulet shark that I'm running my cursor back and forth on. And his mouth is right here, very low on his body. So it would be hard for him to bite you while you felt what his back felt like. This is a guitar fish, and this animal is a stingray, probably an Atlantic stingray, a little hard to tell from dead on in the front. They have their mouths absolutely on the bottoms of their bodies. And we're going to show you how that works here in just a minute. So these are shallow water animals that live in lagoons, coastal coral reefs, mangrove swamps, and people get a lot of pleasure from touching them. Now this little fellow, I might run him back. You see how low on his body his fins are? These are pectoral fins. These are pelvic fins. Let me run him back just a skosh. Watch and see how he doesn't so much swim with those fins as walk across the bottom. That's because he's adapted to live in shallow water. Now we have a treat today. We get to watch my friend Kyle McFeeters feed Stingray Bay. And he's showing you the clam and the silver sides, the shrimp. There's krill. It's a very large krill on the top of that food tub. And he's going to throw a handful way out in the middle so that he doesn't get so badly mobbed. And now he will feed by hand. This happens before we open. So you don't get to see this on a regular tour. You have to know somebody. And that's a coral cat shark. The polka dotted ones are coral cat sharks. Now watch how that guitar fish, this guitar fish right here, watch how he can just, oh, and here the bat ray is going to give it away. You see how their mouths are on the bottoms of their bodies. They cannot take food out of the water. They have to scoop it up off the bottom or some surface, as you will see. And that's what makes them so safe to touch, is they really can't bite you. Well, what about their stingers, you ask? Because they are called stingrays for a reason. But they don't have a stinger like a bee has a stinger. That's a hypodermic thing. Look, there, now you're really seeing that mouth on the bottom of that stingray's body. And you're going to get to see that again really, really well right here. And a little flap. Oh, that's not what I wanted you to do, silly video. All right, we'll talk about them in just a second. So I want to make sure that I'm clear about the stingray's barbs. Stingrays don't have the hypodermic system that wasps and bees do. They just have a sharp pointed stick that rests on top of their tail. And actually I might hurt myself if I know. The pencil is going to be my barb. So here's my tail and here's my barb. And at the base of the barb is a venom gland. And when I'm frightened or in pain, I reflexively begin to jerk my tail. And my barb will poke into my attacker. And when the wound reaches the venom gland at the bottom, the venom gets in the wound. And it hurts really badly, I'm told, by people who have had the misfortune to be stung by a stingray. We don't leave those barbs on those fish when we invite you to touch them. We trim them back. They're made of the same stuff as your fingernails. And so we're able to cut those barbs back on a regular basis. Every 2 to 3 months, Kyle rounds up all the stingrays, inspects each one for health and barb length. And we use a little dog nail clipper and clip them off, and end of story. All taken care of. There's one more thing I wanted to show you, and that is these stingray jaws. Now, I know you're accustomed to seeing, y'all have gotten around, I suspect. You've seen lots of shark jaws before with all these sharp teeth. So shark teeth go together kind of like this and grab a thing. But stingray's jaws and teeth have evolved to be crushing plates like this, because by and large, they scoop things off the bottom of the ocean. And those things are usually crunchy and hard, like mussels and clams and little lobstery creatures. I was going to say crayfish, but they're freshwater. So things with hard shells, and they need those crushing jaws to help them render their food digestible. And so here are some stingray jaws. Now, if these jaws were still in the stingray, their orientation would be like this, because remember, the stingray's mouth is on the bottom of his body. But in order to show you how they work, I'm going to hold them like this because it's easier. So if you look closely, you'll see that, oh, where's my pointer? You'll see that here, these teeth are kind of worn. I'm going to magnify them for you in a minute too, because that's where that stingray is crushing its hard food. If you look at the back side, well, I'm just going to use this other camera. So hang in with me, and we're going to switch to this camera that's going to let you see them a little better. Jack, is that clearer?
It's clearer, but it's hard to tell where the teeth actually are. Is that white line in there the actual teeth?
Well, that's because here, let me show you the fresh teeth that are still in the back of the fish's mouth. Can you see how the teeth run across like this?
Yes.
And they're very hard. Now I can make this camera magnify more, and I probably will, but it's ridiculous. It's a manual focus. So I have to pick it up and turn the ring around the lens, which is kind of a dizzying trip for you. So I won't do it any more than I can help. It made my sister a little sick to her stomach when she was my guinea pig when I was getting ready for y'all. All right, any questions or remarks about Stingray Bay so far, or the ocean journey building? You got anything, Jack?
Of course, Jack has a question.
Okay, let's hear it, Jack.
I noticed that your technician is using his bare hands to feed them. Is there any danger in that, in the sense of him injecting something in the water that would be bad, or something comes back to him?
So there's always danger. You know, you get out of bed in the morning and you can hurt yourself. But I will tell you that there are two sources of pathogens, and we're on top of both of them. One of the sources of pathogens is the seafood itself that we're feeding, but we feed only restaurant quality seafood when we're feeding things that's purchased by restaurants. And then we buy USDA inspected seafood whenever that's possible. So we're not just buying seafood from some sketchy somebody on a boat on the pier. So our seafood's nice and clean. And the other thing is the way we take care of that water. We have huge filters in the basement of that building that filter the water with sand and gravel, just as you would in an in-ground swimming pool in your home or a country club. And then we disinfect the water. And for that volume of water, what we use to disinfect is ozone. And you know, ozone is bad for living things. Well, that includes microorganisms. So we generate ozone. Ozone is 3 molecules. I wish I had a third hand. Atmospheric oxygen is 2 atoms of oxygen floating around. And if we had another fist to add to this, then we'd have ozone, and it would be toxic. And we make that ozone. We have an ozone generator, and we force the ozone into some of the water. We pull some of the water out, put it in a pressurized canister, force the ozone in. That kills the microorganisms. Well, now, if we sent that water to the exhibit, it would also kill the fish. So we have to switch that water into a different pressurized canister and suck the ozone back out again. It's kind of like a Coca-Cola going flat, only faster. And then we break up that ozone. We have a destruct unit that breaks that extra atom off of the ozone molecule. So we're not releasing ozone into the atmosphere in Chattanooga. It's safe to come here and breathe. And we test the water for ozone levels and make sure that it's safe before we send it back to the exhibit. And I misspoke, that ozone doesn't actually kill the microorganisms. It scrambles their DNA, which is the same thing. They cannot reproduce. Okay, Jack will try to be more careful about the questions he asks because I can go on.
Yes, he
And-
will. He probably won't ask anymore.
Are those eyes above the mouth on the stingray? No, they're not. I'll go back to that picture. I think I'll go back to that picture. Yeah, I love this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this one before, and let's run it up and find one of those pictures. Don't watch, it'll make you sick at your stomach. And I'll explain what those are.
There you go. Stop.
There we go. Those are actually, let me make sure I'm telling you the truth. All right. These are, here's the mouth, and then these are the outlets for the respiratory system. Most fish, when they respire, take in water through their mouths. It goes across their gills. They take the oxygen out of the water across their membranes in their gills, just like we do in our lungs. And then the water goes out those gill slits on the sides of their head. Well, the stingray, having evolved into a bottom-feeding organism, if they were to suck water in their mouths all the time, they'd be sucking up sand and mud and muck to go across their gills all the time. So let's see if I can find a top. I know I haven't actually answered your question yet. I promise I will. Maybe we can see it here. Here's the animal's eye, and just behind it, that you can just see over the edge of the fin, is what's called a spiracle. And it's the hole that the water goes in to go across the gills. And then out these little outlets here. So these are his outlets. I expect you're talking about these holes here. Those are his nares. So they can take water in their nares, and they have an olfactory sense there, just like we have in our nares. And it helps them to find food. But what's even better for them is all around the top of the head here, they have the same little sensory organs called ampullae dei Lorenzii, because an Italian man discovered them, that help them find food because they can detect teeny tiny pressure changes in the water to include the heartbeat of a mussel or the heartbeat of a clam. They can feel it down in the substrate and they go, ooh, a clam, slurp, and suck it up with this mouth that's on the bottom of their bodies, and they have the entree. Okay, I can't see the chat box anymore, Jack, so I'll need your help. Any more questions before we go on to the next exhibit? Well, it's not really the next exhibit, but it's the next animal.
How large do these stingrays get?
It depends upon the species. I'm trying to think what our smallest stingray is. Probably those bat rays, the dark one with the mouth that came really far down is our smallest, and it's the size of a big frisbee. Our southern stingrays, and this is a southern stingray, you can tell because the top of the head is very rounded, they get to be big. They get to be like 4 feet across, a mature female. The females are larger than the males because they have to carry the egg sacs. Excuse me, I lied. Rays have pups. They have to carry the pups. The sharks in this exhibit use egg cases for their young. So quick, use the chat box. Who knows what this animal is?
You said what it was.
Did I?
The little caption appeared on the video.
Well, that's all right. That's not cheating. That's just using all the resources available to you.
The box said it was a horseshoe crab.
And that is absolutely correct. These are horseshoe crabs, which is a really bad name for them because they're not crabs at all. They are such primitive arthropods. Arthropods are animals with jointed legs that all of their relatives have gone extinct. And the closest thing are spiders and scorpions. And so they have all these walkie legs. Here's how they eat. They're bottom feeders too. But I wanted you to be able to see how the mouth works. If you look right here, you'll see they're not really hairs, but we're going to call them hairs at the base of the leg. And I'm pointing to them with my cursor that help to move that fish into the animal's mouth. Now, of course, he has some feeding legs here in the front and walking legs, each of which ends in 2 toes. And I'm gonna, no, too soon. I'm gonna try, no, really, too soon. That's not a good look. Let's try that. Okay, so here are the feeding legs pushing the fish in with the help of the hairs. Here are the walking legs with the 2 toes at the end. And then the very last pair of legs end in these flower petal shaped structures that allow the animal to swim. But really they mostly steer because these gill plates, these gill flaps, are what they use to push themselves along. They get on their backs and the gill plates flap like my hands are flapping. And then they kind of steer with the flower petal feet. It's really fun to, they don't swim often, mostly they walk. All right, so in the interest of time, we're gonna watch him eat, and then they have really scary looking tails. And you think, oh, is he gonna sting me with that tail? But this horseshoe crab is trying to use his tail for its intended purpose. Can anybody guess what it might be? Use that chat box. This is kind of hard to see because we're looking at it through the surface of the water, and it's much harder to discern what's going on through the surface, which is why we have acrylic windows for you to watch the animals through instead. Have we gotten a guess yet?
My wife suggested it's used for digging in the sand.
That is so close because it does dig in the sand when it uses it. It's not digging a hole, but it's actually used to turn the animal over. They live in shallow ocean near beaches, and they often get tumbled by waves. And then they use that, it's called a telson if you want to be geeky, it's a tail. They use that tail to lever themselves up and they fall over sideways. But this one has learned that Kyle is a swell guy and he'll come along and turn him over. All right, let's see where we're going next. It's somewhere in the ocean journey. Ah, yes, we're going to lemurs. Lemurs are actually the next door neighbors of Stingray Bay. So I wanted you to get to see this map. Lemurs are endemic. That can be your vocabulary word for the day. That means they only come from Madagascar. And of course, Madagascar is a great big island that we're pretty sure split off the east coast of Africa. The difficulty is it's traveled around so much, tectonically speaking. We think it may have crashed into the Indian subcontinent at least once, based on not only the geology of the rocks, but the kinds of animals, the DNA of the animals that we find there. Many of them seem to have African origins, but some do have Asian origins. Wow. Which is all about island biogeography. And if you want an easy way to learn about island biogeography, read David Quammen's Song of the Dodo. It's long and it's intricate, but if you take it one chapter at a time and chat with a friend about it, it is so interesting. It's about island biogeography. Okay, so here's Madagascar. I'm sorry, that's one of my favorite things in the world. So I digress. We have 3 species of lemurs. One of them, the ringtails, are from this dry, spiny forest. They're really bizarre looking trees there, and it's pretty arid. It's about as arid as it can be and still support trees. Then there are these lush here in the northeastern part of the island. There's rainforest, but it's actually a highland rainforest up here. And it's extremely wet and the forest is very dense. And then it transitions from what we think of as a rainforest down to this dry, spiny forest. And our 3rd species of lemur comes from this transitional rainforest in the southeastern part of the island. So let's meet them. This is the dry, spiny forest exhibit, and resting in it are our ringtail lemurs. And you see some grooming going on there. They have special bottom teeth that are just exactly like a comb. And they use those comb-like teeth to groom their fur. And they're called ringtail lemurs for obvious reasons. You see the rings around their tail. And scientists, I have to stop here because they go too fast. Scientists believe that the lemurs can identify individuals by the pattern of the rings. They just all look like rings around their tails to us humans. But behaviorists are trying to figure out if that's really true. It seems to be. And the ringtails do use their tails to communicate with each other. They spend most of their time on the ground in their dry, spiny forest because that's where the food is. The trees are not very lush. And when they're walking about, they'll hold their tails up straight so that they can alert members of their colony and everybody knows who's saying what. I want to turn your attention for just a moment to this little lemur down here who is brown in color. How very appropriate because it's called a brown lemur. It's a red-collared brown lemur, and they're sharing space with the ringtails today. You'll see them come back out in a moment. But the ringtails are alerting to something, and the thing to which they are alerting, see the balance walking down that vine? The tail is used only for balance. It's not prehensile. It can't grab things. These animals are primates, but they are not monkeys. Monkeys have prehensile tails. So there they spilled the beans. They were alerting because Maggie was coming into the exhibit, and she's going to show you how she can station them. They go where she goes, and then she can more finely station them by pointing to where she wants them to go. Sometimes it doesn't work, as you're about to see here. That was as close as he would come. We have a colony of male ringtails. We have no female ringtails, which is fortunate for these guys because lemur societies are ruled by a dominant female. So they don't have a big female pushing them around. They do have a dominant structure that you're going to see in a minute. And we're going to zoom in on the underside of this lemur and show you a couple of adaptations that make them so good at living where they live. First of all, you get your first really good look at that tail used for communication in so many ways. These big feet with soft, squishy skin on them help them to climb. And I hope you're able to see the dot right here on this animal's wrist. We're going to keep running. There are going to be some other close-up looks at the underside. Oh, that's a good one. See this black dot on this lemur's wrist? That's one of the ways that they communicate. They have spines, or not spines, but spurs we call them. So think about a rooster's spur on a rooster's leg. Lemurs have those on their arms, and they use them to scratch up tree bark, and then they'll apply their scent to that tree bark. And they have scent glands on their chests So they don't have to turn around and use the scent gland on their tail. They can scratch a place with their wrists and then rub their chests on it. Voila, my tree. Who are you going to talk to? You don't like it, you step outside, I'll fix you. So that's how they determine their territory often. Let's see what else this lemur is going to do for us. They have a thick coat because in the desert it gets cold at night, and that helps to keep them warm. So you see how Maggie can ask that lemur to hop onto the netting. And this allows us to position them. This is a training for husbandry, for taking better care of them, because we can position them on netting or on wire so that we can see their undersides and make sure they're still healthy and safe. So here are the brown lemurs, the red-collared brown lemurs. See that question mark in the tail? That's very relaxed. That means I'm just walking around, chilling. If the tail is straight, like this, now you're going to see some communicating take place. I'll go ahead and spill the beans. This lemur is scent marking this log, and it's not with his chest glands either. So he's got his tail up. He's saying, okay, I'm making this log mine. Meanwhile, a more dominant lemur is enjoying a breakfast of romaine lettuce up on the ledge. And he's just chilling out until another lemur comes along and is eyeballing his romaine lettuce and thinking about maybe how that might be tasty for his breakfast. He sees him and says, "Not today, Bubba," and runs him off. So this one that's dropped down to the ledge, the middle ledge now, is the most dominant. And this question mark tail, he's going, no, 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 I don't know nothing about no scent marking. I'm relaxed. Nothing going on here. Nothing to see. Move along. So he's going to sit down and relax and see what develops. Meanwhile, you see that these animals live with radiated tortoises in their exhibit. Here are the tortoises back here. Radiated tortoises also live in the dry spiny forest of Madagascar. So there's that dominant one. I think he's still on the middle edge. Yep. And he says, you know what? There's something going on over here. I can't quite figure out what. Oh, look at this. Only he's saying, smell at this. Somebody left this scent mark, and then they exchange a glance. That was a pretty intense stare. The dominant one gave the one that scent marked, who's now saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just sitting over here, enjoying the sunshine, no sweat. So there are these interactions about dominance going on all the time. How's our chat box doing, Jack?
Pretty empty. I don't think we have time to discuss how you divide the animals from the fish and the aquatic animals. These animals are not aquatic at all, are they?
Good point. So why does an aquarium have non-aquatic animals? It's because we originally opened as, and we continue to have as one of our core values, the fact that we're a freshwater life center here. Actually, that's a really great question. We get it all the time. I thought I was going to have to look at all fish here. Well, if you adore fish, then perhaps it's disappointing to have a few mammals, amphibians, reptiles to brighten your day too. But for an awful lot of people, it's nice to have a variety, and they do all fit together. I mean, I feel like I'm on the Lion King when I start talking about the web of life, but it's quite true that everything connects back to everything else. Actually, this exhibit that you're seeing now, which is our red-ruffed lemur exhibit, and these are the lemurs that live in that far northeastern corner of Madagascar in the deep rainforest. And this exhibit reflects that. Their exhibit is over water. because in the rainforest, you find a lot of water. It's always running downhill into a creek or stream, but it's definitely there. So our exhibits intermingle aquatic and non-aquatic animals as you would find in nature, just not quite so convenient. And I don't know why this is on my mind, but I'll share it with you, which is that in our organization, there's a separation between aquatic and not aquatic animals. We have aquarists who take care of fish, and we have a forestry department whose husbandry staff takes care of everything else, the amphibians, the reptiles, and the very few mammals that we have. I hope that answers your question. If that's not what you meant to find out, rephrase it in the chat box and Jack and I'll take another run at it. I wish I didn't get those notifications in the middle of a program. All right, so here are the red-ruffed lemurs. They live at a much higher elevation, so they have an even thicker coat. Their long tail is not used for communication because it's difficult to see through a thick rainforest. And so they use their voices to communicate. And if you're ever in the building about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't know what it is, but the red-ruffed lemurs go off and it's like a siren going by. I don't know if you all do it, but when a siren passes me, if I'm a pedestrian on the street, I put my fingers in my ears, and I do the same thing when the red ruffs start communicating with each other. This is our male avior. He's about 19 years old, and this is his resting posture. This is Josephine. She's our female. She's 23. She's in her 20s. And she's not too old to be fruitful, but probably. Now, avior is doing this behavior as he's been trained to do so that we can show you that soft, fleshy skin that allows for a really tight grip on a tree. You sort of saw it in the ringtails, but the red-ruffed lemurs, being even more arboreal than the ringtails, have bigger paws and softer skin that spreads and gives a grip. You're going to see that in action in just a moment. So she's reinforcing him with little treats for showing you his hands. Now this is Josephine, and she's going to show you how red-ruffed lemurs harvest fruit and flowers in the rainforest. This is a perfectly natural behavior that we have simply captured on cue. To show people, this is one of the main reasons we train our animals, is so that we can show people natural behaviors on demand, so that our guests get to know the animals better, because we feel that we're diplomatic liaisons between our animals and our guests. So she's hanging on tight there with those strong hind feet. The tail is purely for balance. It cannot grip. She's a primate, but she is not a monkey. Not all primates are monkeys. And now she's going to show you one of their most important roles in the rainforest. Who thinks that if she was out in nature doing that to a real flower, what service she would be performing?
Pollination.
Absolutely. Red-ruffed lemurs are the world's largest pollinator.
Wow.
Their muzzles are narrow and long to fit down in flowers. Now what she's licking up with that remarkably long tongue today is strawberry jelly, which is one of her favorites. But, and of course we rigged this up so that you could see the length of the tongue. So pay attention to the tongue in the jar. But then the pollen gets on their muzzles and faces, and of course they take it on to the next flower that they're trying to get nectar from. Their diet is in nature is primarily fruit and flowers. Those, you may have noticed those big canines. They're not for catching and killing animals. They're for breaking into the husks of tough-skinned fruit. All right, we're about to leave lemurs. Does anybody have a burning question about lemurs or a remark to make? Like, I never saw a lemur before, but I love them now. That's what we like to hear.
Never seen red ones.
All right, well, Jack will watch for you,
Yep.
and we will go on to the next video. Now, how am I gonna do this? There's not enough time when I need to talk, and then things get long and dull. We are now behind the scenes at the Secret Reef, which is our largest exhibit, 618,000 gallons of artificial seawater. We have about 3,600 different fish, not different species, but 3,600 fish representing 60 species, but that includes one reptile species and both of our shark species. Because remember, help me spread this message, please. Sharks are fish too. They're so special and so different that quite often people think of them as belonging to some other group of animals, but sharks are fish too. All right, so the food over here is very finely chopped seafood with krill added. This is what we call gel food. It's still partially frozen. You make it up like Jell-O jigglers. It comes as a powder. You put boiling water in it, leave it in the refrigerator overnight, and it gels up really firm and hard. Then we cube it and freeze it so that we can have it anytime we need it. It's primarily for our algae eaters. We have medium cut seafood here and here. They're separate because these will be fed to the stingrays and these will be fed to the pelagic, another vocabulary word, that means open ocean. The pelagic fish, and underneath, you'll get another look at them, are the big seafood, the whole fish and half fish for the sharks. Now, my friend Danny, who's an aquarist, is preparing what we call the veggie tubes or salad bars for the algae eaters. We don't want to put algae in here. It's hard to grow, expensive to buy. You can buy it. So we use romaine lettuce because it's extremely nutritious. Iceberg lettuce is not nutritious and we don't feed it to any of our animals. We also, as you can see, feed broccoli, and the crowns go in the other end. There are two notches cut in this big heavy-duty PVC pipe. Big notch for the romaine, narrow notch for the broccoli. And then there's a line, a rope here, and we can throw it in and then retrieve it and refill it. Here are the fish for the sharks, pole and ready to go on the pole for the target feeding that we'll show you. Now, Danny's going to take that fine cut seafood and krill, and he's going to load it into this machine that we have. This is a machine that delivers the fine cut seafood way down deep to 10 different locations in the rockwork. There are 4 tubes up here, but they split, they divide and go different places in the exhibit through the concrete and emerge at 10 different places that the fish know well. And so the seafood appears down there. We do this because our sharks are big enough to be dangerous to our divers. And so divers never go into the exhibit with food. So we have to have a way to deliver food to the animals that have to eat on the bottom. Now you've seen Danny hose the seafood down a little bit to settle it in the tube. And now he's putting that frozen gel food on top. He didn't want to put in the gel food and then hose, or it turns the gel food to mush. Then he'll turn on water that's in the pipes below where you saw that will create a suction and pull that seafood down to the delivery points. All of the animals in the Secret Reef are fed at the same time. And that's partially because these pelagic fish that you're about to see in action at the surface are bad about stealing everybody else's food or trying to eat everybody else if they're small enough. And so they have to be distracted. And that's Tina's job today. She's taking that seafood that had the scoop in it and she says hello, and she's flinging it out onto the surface, and the fish rush to eat it. And that distracts them from, say, the sharks that are being target fed at a specific place. The stingrays are being fed on the side of the exhibit. The little fish are getting their food down deep. And these big dangerous fish, dangerous to their neighbors, are being distracted by their food being introduced at the surface. Now here's Danny feeding the stingrays. Remember, we can't take the divers down to feed them on the bottom. The exhibit is too deep to throw food in and expect it to get to them. And so they're trained to swim up on this wall. So Danny's actually lying on his belly on the floor, leaning over the edge of the exhibit and holding seafood against the edge of the wall here for this stingray. This stingray's coming straight at you. There's his Telson. He does not have his barb clipped off because nobody ever pets him, just feeds him, and then the divers know how to behave. So this is just a little tiny short bit to show you how that seafood, we slide it down the side of the exhibit. The ray swims up over our hand, and then we let it go in time for him to get the seafood and not our fingers, because remember what those ray jaws look like. They can pinch really hard. Here's our sandbar shark. We have 2 female sandbar sharks. There's a sated stingray. Danny did his job well, just to give you an idea of what this exhibit looks like through the windows. Here comes a veggie bar into the water, and some really inappropriate fish attack it just because it's there. But here is one of the animals for which it was really intended. This is the larger of our 2 male green sea turtles. His name is Stewie, and he lives for romaine lettuce. Now here's Jake. He's target feeding sharks. See, all of this is going on at once. It's a madhouse on a bad day and a beautifully choreographed ballet on a good day. So he's put that fish on the end of his big long pole, and he's trying to feed the sandbar sharks. They know to come to this place in the exhibit. They're fed at the same place every day, and they come to it expecting to eat. But Jake's job is really hard because he has to get that fish on the end of his pole to the shark without letting the jacks, there goes one now, without letting the jack steal it. And that jack is trying hard. Jake got it away from him that time. He still has his fish on the end of the pole. He's trying to get it to the shark. He's almost got it to the shark, and the jack got it. So he's very patient. He pulls up his pole, reloads it, tries again. Danny's in the background feeding the sand tiger sharks. And we're just going to watch this quietly. You must be tired of the sound of my voice by now. And see how gently the sharks eat. Boop, fish gone. When we see sharks on the Discovery Channel, it's all thrashing and bashing and blood and teeth. But animals don't do that if they don't have to. And these sharks know that if they'll just wait for Jake and be polite, they can gently take their fish off the end of the pole.
We have a question from Patty Cloy, and that is, how often are they fed?
Fabulous question, because it's really, really important. One last fish coming. Sharks are offered food 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We don't like to say we feed them because that makes it sound like we force them to eat. Little tug was required to get that one off. We never force anybody to eat, but we do offer food 3 times a week. And as you see, the aquarists are target feeding. they can tell the sharks apart, even through the surface of the water. And they keep track on a clipboard of which shark ate how many pounds of seafood and with what was the shark's demeanor when it ate. Was it tearing at the food? Was it snapping it off the end of the pole like he was really hungry? Or did I have to beg him to take one fish? And that's taken into account when the shark's next feeding is planned, pulled, and thawed, because we always thaw our seafood overnight in the refrigerator. That's basic food safety, and we practice it for our animals as well as, well, we don't feed many people here, and certainly not seafood, but definitely for our animals. And so the sharks, the amount the sharks are offered varies depending upon how much they ate last time and with what vigor. And the reason we do that, we feed them much more frequently than they would eat out in nature. But we do that so that they don't eat the neighbors. Sharks, unlike myself, are not recreational eaters. They only hunt and eat when they are truly hungry. And so we work never to let them get truly hungry. But we don't want to overfeed them and make them fat and unhealthy. So it's a careful balance all the time. Thank you so much for asking that question, because it answered Jack's question about, do we have to worry about the sharks eating other fish? You saw Danny in the video. I cornered him one day. I said, Danny, people are always asking, you have to tell me the truth. How many fish do the sharks eat? And he thought, kind of counted up on his fingers. He said, I think we lose about 3 fish to the sharks every year. Trust me, the jacks take more than that. We have horse-eye jacks that get quite large. We have crevel jacks, and they are ferocious hunters. All right, so how are y'all holding up? I feel like I'm just going on. Are you okay?
Yes.
All right, fabulous. Well, let's get back to screen sharing then and see where we're going to go. Oh, I know where we're going to go next. We're not going anywhere, but I think you'll like this. All right, on to the next one. Jake fed the turtles for me one day so that I could film it for you. This is Oscar's food. Now let's see what he's getting. Oh, no, come back, Jake. Let's see what Oscar's getting. And you'll meet Oscar briefly. These are cucumbers because green sea turtles are largely vegetarians. They eat algae and seaweed. But they love seafood. It's like candy bars. And so we maintain their training with seafood because it's such a treat. Here are some shrimp, a smelt here. Yes, I know it's a freshwater fish, but they still love it. They're very oily fish, and I think that's what they like. Here's a little green pepper, and here are some apples. So that's Oscar's food. And then Jake is going to make up another bowl for Stewie. Stewie is the green sea turtle you've already met, eating romaine. And they do get the romaine and the broccoli every single day of the week. And then I'm pretty sure Jake trains and gives them these supplemental foods 5 days a week, because we do want to maintain their training. Now, you may be thinking, a trained sea turtle. Are you serious? Yes, but they're one-trick sea turtles. You've heard of a one-trick pony? Well, they're one-trick sea turtles. They are trained to touch their nose to a pole like this one. And Jake's going to bang it on the side. He's calling Stewie. Oscar has a different sound to alert him to the fact that he has the opportunity to earn these treats by coming and touching this pole with his nose. But that's Stewie's signal, is to have the pole banged on the side of the exhibit. He hears that, he swims over. If he wants to work, our trained animals always have the choice to work or not. No one is ever forced or starved into working. And so Stewie has come over here of his own accord to get treats for putting his nose on this pole. Now, I did notice when I was editing this video that Jake is a little bit soft. He doesn't really make Stewie touch the pole anymore, but that's how the training started. He is using the pole to direct Stewie's direction. And that's why this training is valuable, because now we can call Stewie over, we can put the pole in the water, and we can move him to any point in the exhibit we need him to be, to include an enclosed acclimation pool that's only 5 feet deep, where we can restrain him, put him in a harness, winch him out of the water. He's been treated a couple of times. See the white mark on the top of his head? He has a tendency to have injuries on the top of his head because he'll shove his head into places they shouldn't go. And we used this training to bring him into the acclimation pool, harness him, winch him out of the water, and have the vet clean such a lesion. This one's not bad. The other one was bad. And then we needed to put a Band-Aid on it. Well, how do you keep a bandage on in salt water long enough for it to heal? We have a very clever vet. He brought along a dentist friend. And so Dr. Keller, the vet, cleaned the wound, put antibiotic on it, and his dentist friend covered it up with tooth amalgam, like you have your fillings made of, brought the blue light and everything, hardened the amalgam, and it covered that injury with medication inside for about 8 weeks. Stewie looked like he was wearing a wedding yarmulke. And when it fell off, his head was better. So actually this video clip is about turtle feeding, and you've already seen Stewie doing this. I use this with elementary students to ask about what adaptations they see. So this is Stewie chowing down on that veggie bar, and you've already had that introduced to your lives. So here's our other male green sea turtle, Oscar, and you'll see that he's not quite like Stewie. He is literally not all there. When he was a tiny tyke, 17 pounds and about the size of a dinner plate, he was hit by a motorboat. And the propellers amputated his right hind flipper, his tail, and most of his left hind flipper, and left these gouges in his upper shell, and there's a corresponding one in his lower shell. He's very lucky to be alive. He was almost immediately found by some other boaters and taken to a turtle rehab center in Florida, where his lung was exposed. That's how bad it was. And they pulled him through, and he came to us when he weighed about 25 pounds. He weighs about 210 now. So seafood and veggies have worked well for him. You see, his pole is just white. He was afraid of the colors on Stewie's pole. And so we had to give Oscar a plain white pole. Any questions about turtles? Turtle feeding, turtle training, training in general? Training is not only something that I do a lot of here at the aquarium, but it's my hobby. I love training things. But what I want to know is why does it ever work on my husband?
Paul Clark asks what the average lifespan, I suspect, are turtles. And someone else asked, who chooses the turtles' names?
Some bad person chose Stewie's. I think that's rude. You may have to help me with the first question again in just a minute. Our animals are often named in a public contest. People can submit names and we'll either draw one, or staff will choose from those, or staff sometimes proposes a menu of names and then we let the public vote. There's a great deal of naming among the penguins because we do have chicks from time to time. So we're always having to come up with names for the penguins. We have names for our octopus also. You're not going to see an octopus today. Don't get your hopes up. But staff almost always names the octopus, for example. Oscar sort of named himself. When he came to us, he had been in an outdoor facility in Florida at the rehab center, and he was covered with filamentous green algae. And so when he was in the water, the algae would float straight up, and it looked like green hair all over his shell. And so it made him look like Oscar.
The Grouch.
The crowd.
Grouch, that's right. That's how he got his name. He's not the least bit grouchy, but he looked a lot like Oscar the Grouch minus the trash can when he came to us. So sometimes the animals name themselves, and sometimes we have fun letting people name them. How long do they live? It's really hard to know. There is no way to accurately age sea turtles out in nature, to catch them and look at a bone or look at a scale and tell how old they are. So we have to depend upon sea turtles that are living in human care. The problem is that they live so long that records get lost, burned up, corrupted. We're pretty sure they can live to be at least 75, quite possibly much older. Although they're terrestrial, their land-dwelling relatives, the tortoises, have them beat by miles. They're 150 documented. Any others, Jack, before we go on?
Not right now.
Well, guess where we're going? We're going to go to the Boneless Beauties Gallery and see the jellies. And these are Pacific sea nettles. Now, gosh, I don't even know where to start with jellies because there's so much that's interesting about them that I want to tell you, and you don't want to listen to me talk that long. So let me just say that these are extremely simple animals, and yet their adaptations have made them supremely successful in the ocean. That bell, the part that's undulating, that bell has no major organs in it. It's made up of muscles and water and gel and goo. There's a nerve net running through it. And then around the edge of the bell, there's sensory organs that can tell the animal, am I right side up? Am I upside down? Is there light over there or is it dark over there? And that information passes through their neural net and stimulates their muscles to move in ways that are advantageous to their orientation and location. I do have to stop here though. I want you to understand that, okay, so here's the bell. The red things hanging down are tentacles. The jelly's mouth, these jellies have great big mouths. And they're not only located here in the center underneath the bottom of the bell, but they hang down really far. So this whole apparatus is the mouth. And then the lacy things hanging down from the mouth are called oral arms. We feed brine shrimp to our jellies twice a day, in some cases 3 times a day. But I got lucky and Cheryl fed these what we call meat cubes, which are frozen chunks of larger organisms than brine shrimp. Here are the meat cubes. So in those cubes, there are cyclopes, which are not particularly large, but also large mysids. And so Cheryl's loading it for you. Are all our aquarists hams or what? And she's putting that in the water. And then as those cubes melt and release those big food items, the jellies get really excited. I don't know, they don't have brains, but they still get excited because they can sense that food on their tentacles and their oral arms. And those are really big food items. It's like getting to have a Big Mac. Your doctor says you can only have one a month, and it's Big Mac Day, and you get excited about it, and you want to make sure the whole thing gets in your mouth. And so they use their oral arms to move the food into their mouths. And that's what you're going to see here. You're going to see those oral arms get very short and pulled down. See, there it goes, pulled down into the bell to deliver the food to the mouth. That little guy in the back is real, his oral arms are really short. He's pulling them in, but there's going to be one more that outdoes him. There you go. Those oral arms are almost completely pulled down inside the bell and delivering food to that animal's mouth. Jellies were long thought to be impossible to keep in human care because aquarists would catch them in the ocean and put them in a fish tank and they'd all pile up in the corner and die. And one smart German aquarist figured out that to keep these animals, the corners of the enclosure have to be rounded and there must be a constant circular current to keep the animals suspended in the water. Because think about where they live. They live out in the open ocean. They're not meant to touch anything except their food and the animals that eat them. And so in a regular rectangular fish tank, they do not thrive. So the exhibit that these animals are in is only about 1.5 feet from the front acrylic to the back, but it's huge and it's oval shaped. And the water circulates constantly in a circular motion. How are y'all holding up?
We're doing good. How big do the jellyfish get?
That particular species of jelly, let's see, let me think what else is that size. It's bigger than a dinner plate. The bell is, I'm going to hold my hands close to my face so that, you know, because I can make my hands look really big up here. So I'm holding my hands close to my face. One of those bells would cover up my face, and I'm not a delicate girl. And their oral arms are 3 to 4 feet long. They're a large jelly. Their jellies come in all shapes and sizes, and their reproduction is the most interesting thing about them. They have got that strategy down. I don't think anyone will ever beat a jelly for reproductive success, but I don't have time to tell you about that. Look up alternation of generations if you want to know about it. It's cool stuff. Nature magic, that's what it is. All right, are you all hanging with me okay? Here's something everybody can love. We're at the penguins now. Our penguins live in water that's 42 degrees Fahrenheit, and so is their air year round. That's a summer temperature for them. And this is a Gentoo penguin. You'll see that he's come up of his own accord to the acrylic, and he's eyeballing me. He's checking out my cell phone while I'm filming. When you visit the Penguin Gallery, you are enrichment for our animals. They love to come to the acrylic and see what you're wearing and see what you're carrying. So here are the Gentoo penguins up close and personal. You can tell them from our other species because these have the white band over the head, yellow feet, and yellow beaks. They're the 3rd largest penguin in the world, exceeded in size only by the king and emperor penguins. The emperor is the largest. Oh, here, let's run that back because that's really, really important. Okay, what is important is this Gentoo penguin's tail. I'm sorry that's not in better focus. Penguins have those little short legs and they're constricted inside their body. So it's kind of like you trying to walk with your knees tied together. And you would be very precarious and tippy if you didn't have something to lean on. And what penguins lean on is their tails. And let me stop here so that you get a bigger picture. And here are some penguin tail feathers. So I'm holding them right next to my head. They're pretty long. These are Gentoo tail feathers. And they're also extremely stiff.
Wow.
They don't like to bend. So a whole bunch of these, it's, you know, many small threads make a strong rope. So a bunch of these together in a penguin's tail will prop up a 22-pound penguin. That's our heaviest penguin, is a large male named Pancho, and he weighs 22 pounds. They use these tails not only for balance on a regular basis, but they'll often need to climb rocks to where they have made their nests. While we're talking about penguin feathers, let's talk about their body feathers. What do you think is the most important job that a penguin's body feathers does for it? Most important job. And I'll show you one up close. So here's a penguin feather. They're made like no other bird feathers. So here's the tip of the feather. It's kind of rigid. And here's the base of the feather, covered, not covered, but with a lot of down coming out of the shaft. What do you think penguin feathers do for the penguins?
Waterproof.
I heard waterproofing, insulation.
Keeps them warm. Insulation. Yes, yes, yes. And it's the design of this feather that makes that possible. Most birds have down feathers and body feathers and flight feathers. Well, penguins don't need flight feathers. They don't fly, they swim. So now they need body feathers and, what did I say? Down feathers. And this feather is both at the same time. This tip of the feather provides a hydrodynamic surface and interlocks with other feathers of its kind to completely exclude water. And then at the base of the feather, underneath all of those tips that are keeping the water out, is all this down that creates airspace that's the insulation you were talking about. So a single feather doing double duty, 80 of them per square inch. So when this penguin, we're going to go back to sharing. Well, here, let me get back with you here because I don't know what it'll do if I go from the other one. So let's go back to sharing the screen so that you can see. Notice now, as we go along with the penguins, how their feathers intermesh and provide that it's armor against the water, really. And oh, look at that. See that penguin propped up on his tail right back there? Now that's the other species we have besides the Gentoo. You've met the Gentoo. Here's a Gentoo over here. This one and this one are macaroni penguins. And they're easy to tell because they're smaller than the Gentoos. They have pink feet and pinkish orange bills. And then these wild yellow crest feathers. I'm going to let the video run so that we get out of here before supper time. I think you all are very brave to still be sticking with me. I would never keep a live group this long. And I want to make sure you understand that you can leave this call anytime and nobody will even know. So when you've reached your point of that's all the fun you can stand, I thank you for joining me and go do something else. Now, this penguin is doing what's absolutely necessary to keep those feathers working, and that's preening. That preening has two stages. One is to physically manipulate the feathers so that they interlock and keep the water out. And the other, you've seen waterfowl do it, and swans and flamingos. They have a special gland at the base of their tail that produces an oil, a fine, fine oil that they keep spread over their feathers. Now this bird has something wrong with his feathers. Take a look at him and tell me if you think you can figure out what's going on with this bird.
He's not preening.
My wife is guessing that he's not preening.
That is a very good guess. If we had a bird that was not preening though, it would not be out on exhibit. It would be in the backup in isolation under the care of the veterinarian, because birds preen many times a day unless they're ill. So
Yes.
excellent guess. Not preening could result perhaps in that look, but actually there's nothing wrong with this bird.
Michelle Faust suggested that this bird is molting.
That's exactly right. That's why we asked him to come, wasn't it? New feathers are growing in underneath and pushing the old feathers out. And you'll recognize those feathers. They're the same ones I just showed you on the little microscopic camera. So here are all the Gentoos standing about. You get a good look at how to tell them apart from the macaroni that's just swimming in. And the macaroni is going to show you bathing behavior in just a moment, or perhaps it's his friend who shows you bathing behavior. Here we go, on the side and flopping with the flipper. That's a penguin taking a bath. Now, interaction with the keepers every day is very, very important to these birds. Not only because the keepers hand feed them, that way we know exactly how many fish each penguin is eating. And the way we know that is because we have a recorder. On well-staffed days, 2 people feed, and Meg keeps track of how many fish of each kind each penguin ate. And Lori Beth is showing us that there's more than one way to feed a penguin. This is smelt that she's throwing into the water. They're hand-fed a fish called capelin, which has a higher oil content and is really important to their health. It's also big enough to hide their daily vitamins in. So hand feeding the capelin is really important. But then for fun, which we call enrichment when we promote fun for the animals. Oh, wait a minute, I don't want to give this away yet. We let them feed and forage and behave in natural ways, and that's good for their psychological health as well as their physical health. Now, this is a Gentoo penguin, and we're going to have a series of demonstrations of what strong swimmers Gentoo penguins are. They are the fastest underwater swimming bird in the world. They can reach speeds up to 22, 23 miles per hour underwater with their flippers. So they can get up a real head of steam. And this bird's going to try and show you what that's good for. Only that one didn't quite have the hang of it yet. He's one of our youngsters. That's how it's actually done. So you may have seen this on Discovery Channel or whatever nature shows you watch, but there, he's still a beginner, but that was better.
He got up there.
They can shoot up out of the water to land on the deck with us and on ice floes out in nature. So I've mentioned enrichment. It's a very important part of every animal's daily life here at the aquarium. We even enrich the snakes and the frogs. We give them textures and shapes to experience in their own way. But some of these more intelligent animals, like penguins, because they really are very intelligent, especially for birds, only parrots are smarter. So this is a mirror, a floating mirror that the keepers have put into the water just for a different experience. And we don't do the same thing for them every day, or it wouldn't be enriching. So it's like you're having a new activity to do. Now, we do hose this exhibit 3 times a day because penguins poop a lot. And our water filtration system will take care of that, but we have to get it off the deck. Now, Lori Beth is talking to a penguin who's in the backup and about to leave this place where he's supposed to be. We encourage our penguins to go into the back spaces because that's where we take them for 2 medical exams per year. And the scale is back there. We weigh them on a regular basis. They're trained to step up on the scale for a treat. And so she wants him back there and comfortable, but she wants him to stay in the penguin part of the backup and not go into the human part of the backup because there are human germs up there tracked in on shoes. There's a barrier through which we must go after we put on regulation boots and these green covers that the penguin keepers wear to protect the penguins from outside germs.
Julia, Paul Clark asked what the room temperature was.
42 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything else about penguins?
I'm fascinated to know whether or not the emperor penguin is kept in captivity anywhere.
They are. I don't know where. I know they are. They're hideously expensive to keep because they are a deep Antarctic species and they would be too hot. They would perish in 42 degrees Fahrenheit because it would be too hot. And we chose penguins that are found farther north. Remember, north in the southern hemisphere is warmer. That are found farther north on the continent or on that peninsula that sticks out from Antarctica. And one of the reasons is because they're not so expensive to keep. But we still spend a lot of electricity keeping that water chilled and keeping that air conditioning at 42, 365 days a year.
And one more question.
Yeah.
And I apologize to my friend Nancy Soper, who asked it quite a time ago and I missed it. Why do we sometimes have times when lots of jellyfish show up on the Gulf Coast?
Oh, you're going to make me do it, aren't you? All right, let me stop the share just a minute. That is because, so the question is, why do a lot of jellies, and it's not just the Gulf Coast. If you watch those nature shows, you may have seen that jelly populations are soaring in a lot of places around the planet. And we think that's because they respond to the warmer water in that way. And we actually, I hope I can talk about this. Don't anybody tell on me. We have a young woman doing research here with jellies, with a particular species of jelly that's coastal, that lives in warm water. It's called an upside down jelly. It has symbiotic algae in its oral arms, and the algae make most of its food. But we had a lot of them, and we closed that exhibit, and she kept them to do some research. And she has 3 populations of them, and she's exposing 2 of those populations to 2 different but higher levels of carbon dioxide in their water. And they appear to be responding by reproducing faster. And so as we introduce more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere that mixes with the water at the ocean's surface, and as we warm the water, which is clearly happening, just look at all the ice that's melting, we're making the ocean a friendlier place for jellies. And so that can increase their populations as well. Thank you for asking that. And I answered it without even talking about alternation of generations. The thing is, jellies have this so successful strategy for producing huge numbers of young, but still having enough genetic diversity not to crash. They've got it down perfectly. And if we give them an environment that's super friendly to them, then we need to go to Asia and learn how to eat jellies, because they eat jellies. Their moon jellies are delectable, apparently. To me, they were a lot like a very thin foam rubber with soy sauce.
All right, we've gotten 2 more questions. One's from Bill Villa, and he wants to know what is the smallest penguin and what regions do penguins live outside the Antarctic?
Oh, what great questions. And I can just see the tag end of it to serve as a memory tool. The smallest penguin in the world is called the little blue penguin. And it's actually, I think it's one of the burrowing penguins. It makes its nest in a burrow. And it's a warm weather penguin, so it's found much farther north in the southern hemisphere. You can't really say penguins don't live at the North Pole, they live at the South Pole. You can't say penguins don't live in the Arctic, they live in the Antarctic. Penguins live all over, or at least in habitats found all over the southern hemisphere. There are tropical penguins. Jackass penguins are tropical and live on the coast of South Africa. There are penguins in the Galapagos, called Galapagos penguins, not surprisingly. So all over the southern hemisphere, they can live. And what makes each penguin, I didn't show you that, I'm so sorry. All of our penguins wear wing bands.
Oh, you cheap.
And we make them by using a zip tie, one big zip tie that goes around the flipper. Here, we'll pretend this is a flipper. One band that goes around the flipper, but then around the zip tie, we'll use the teeny tiny zip ties in colors. And we use colors and color combinations to identify our penguins. And we can repeat colors. We can have a pink banded Gentoo and a pink banded macaroni, because if you can't tell the difference between a Gentoo and a macaroni, you can't work here. But we use the wing bands. The penguins clearly can tell each other apart, because there's always a great drama in breeding season about this penguin mating up with this penguin, but he was with her last year and he doesn't like her anymore. Oh my word. And the penguin keepers can keep up with all that stuff. And we have volunteers who work in the penguin exhibit and they can keep up with all that stuff. And our aquarium guides, our educational volunteers keep up with all this stuff. I can't keep the penguins straight. I'm sorry, you've seen one Gentoo, you've seen them all. Look at the band. That's how I tell them apart.
Okay, Neil Gaston asked the question too. Do more jellies, referring to the fact that the jelly population could be increasing, do more jellies mean more turtles fed?
In a perfect world, yeah. Well, more leatherback sea turtles fed. Leatherbacks are the ones that eat their primary diet is jellies. Our green sea turtles would eat a jelly here or there, but they really are, as adults, they're mostly vegetarian. As little guys, they eat a lot of animals if they can find them, because the protein fuels their early, faster growth. The difficulty in reality, I fear that unless we get really smart really fast, we're not going to be able to test that question, because turtles are facing so many other challenges that are not related to how many jellies are in their environment. They're fighting against boat strikes, against inappropriate lighting on beaches that keeps them from going to the ocean. They're fighting against ocean plastic pollution that lures them to eat plastic bags instead of jellies, and then they either choke to death or the plastic gets stuck in their digestive tract. They feel full and they don't eat and they starve to death. So many challenges. Still shrimp nets, even though TED's turtle exclusion devices have been required to be added to shrimp nets in a lot of places, not everywhere, and TEDs don't always work. And so gill nets, that's another kind of, I'm going to stop because it's depressing, isn't it? Yes. Sea turtles are facing a lot of challenges. And I will say to you that here at the Tennessee Aquarium, we talk a lot about conservation. We give a lot of conservation messages. And to do that, we have to outline the dangers to animals and to their environments. And it's depressing because we're making a mess of the world. But the good thing about the fact that we're the ones responsible for the mess is that puts us in the perfect position to solve the problem. We created it. we can most easily solve. When a problem occurs naturally, then we have a long time lag to figure out where did this come from, what's causing it, what can we do about it, can we do anything at all about it? But when it's our problem that we have imposed, we've got what we need to start fixing it right now. So you just, I would suggest to you, if you're concerned about that kind of thing, just choose your battles wisely. Choose something that you feel comfortable doing something about. Make sure what you're doing is substantive, and then do it every day and tell your friends and tell them how good it feels to be doing something right for the planet. But I digress. I've struggled against that today. Would you like to see the next exhibit?
I would.
Okay. Let's see if I can remember how to do that. All right. I think, yes, it's time now. Imagine, if you will, that we have walked back across the plaza and entered the River Journey building. Oh, good grief. Let me make this go away. And entered the River Journey building. We have ridden the escalator to the very top, to the 4th floor. I'll let you guess. You can be thinking about this. How long do you think it would take an escalator, moving at a normal kind of an escalator pace, to go all the way from our ground floor lobby to the 4th floor where we begin our tour? How long does it take to get up the escalator in the River Journey building? Jack will keep track of guesses, and I'll tell you if you remind me at the end. So here we are at the top. We've ridden the escalator, and now we are visiting. What are they?
Otters.
That's right. Those are river otters. River otters, not sea otters. These are the otters that are found in Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina. These are our own freshwater otters that live in our backyards. Now, wanted to tell you just a little bit about the exhibit. This is not our original otter exhibit. We learned a lot from that one. And from researchers in the field. Biologists did research about how much time do otters spend on land and how much time do otters spend in the water. And we discovered that they spend a lot less time in the water than we thought. And our old exhibit had too much water and not enough land. So we built this new exhibit. It's much bigger. We have 6 otters. And there's lots more land space for them to explore and play and interact, and for the keepers to provide enrichment. So you see 2 of our otters moving about in the water and on the land. And the one at the top will soon be joined by this one coming out of the water. They are at the end of their shift. You'll see they're not 6 otters out right now. They take turns going out and then doing other activities in the backup. And so they know how long the shifts are. I think they're 3 or 4 hours at a time. And they go up to that door and press their noses against the crack in the door to see if somebody's there to let them in yet. Isn't it quitting time yet? Is the beer cold yet? They want to know. This is what you call an otter ball. When the otters are out in big numbers, and especially when Maya, the female, is out. She's a devil, and she'll start this playing, this wrestling. When you watch it, it makes you feel kind of claustrophobic because you're certain somebody's going to drown, but nobody ever has. They manage to say uncle to each other and get a breath of air when they need it. Now, what you're seeing, here, I want to ask you a question about this. All right, I want you to look for bubbles, please. And I want you to tell me from where do you see bubbles coming? Don't forget the escalator. Are we getting guesses, Jack?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. All right. So keep those escalator guesses coming. How long does it take to go up to the 4th floor? And where are the bubbles coming from? Watch for a minute. So put those answers, where are the bubbles coming from, into the chat box, and Jack will let us know.
Yeah, I've got one answer on the bubbles. We got lots of times, but one answer on the bubbles. The answer
And
is
what is that answer on the bubbles?
fur.
Absolutely. You guys are smart. I'm glad to be with you today. I hope that we get to a point where it's safe for you to come and see us all on a bus together. Scott told me to tell you that he's planning a trip for as soon as it's safe, and there will be a bus trip to the aquarium. And when you come, if I'm physically able to get to the building, I will come and meet you.
Oh, thank
So this is Maya, and you're exactly right about the fur. Let's cover that first. Otter fur is a lot like penguin feathers. There's a layer of oil on the outside. The outside hairs are long and silky and work like a raincoat to keep the water off the other layer of hair, which is a fluffy, downy layer of hair next to the skin. It traps the air, just like the penguin down did, and then those guard hairs protect it from water. But when the animals dive, the water pressure pushes the air out of that air layer next to their skin, or some of the air, and it comes out as bubbles, of course. Their fur is extremely efficient at keeping them warm in cold water. The difference between a penguin and an otter, though, is that penguins live at sea for months. When they're not breeding, they are not on land. They are marine animals, marine birds. Otters are not. They spend a lot of time on land. They have their young on land. They can even hunt on land, but they're better at it in the water. And so they mostly go in the water to either move from place to place or to hunt. Now Maya's going to show us the classic otter body form. Couldn't believe she did this for me. So you see the long streamlined body covered with that fur we talked about, the tail that's extremely powerful. It's mostly used as a rudder to steer, but it can also be used for propulsion, but not back and forth like an alligator's tail, up and down like a dolphin's tail. You see paws that are not unlike, especially the front ones, not unlike lemur paws with soft soles underneath to help the otters search for food where they can only feel and not see, not unlike a raccoon. You see the long whiskers that help them to sense when prey is very close in the water. Eyes and ears, she's not really going to go. Eyes and ears, not eyes, ears and nose both have membranes that can close those orifices completely to keep the water out, and eyes that see just as well underwater as they do in air. And I don't know how they do that. So she's going to waddle off, and I think she's going to the door now. So here are smelt that Amanda brought so that she could show you the target training that the otters do. We train lots and lots of different animals, and she's showing you the size of a smelt. This is a freshwater fish high in oil that comes from the Great Lakes. So they have a fancy target pole with a blue ball on the end, and they've been taught to put their nose to the ball, and you see her hand up, she's asking for a paw on the acrylic. And that's what she got. So now she's going to chuck smelt over the acrylic to reward that behavior. It seems to me that the buddies all got rewarded for somebody else's behavior, but that's better than not reinforcing a correctly performed behavior. And then this is showing you how otters use their teeth. It's an adaptation that we don't encourage the otters to show us or our guests, because an otter has a bad bite. And I have a skull that I'm about to show you. But this is Maya again. She was my most cooperative otter. And she's working on a mackerel. Amanda said that mackerel appear to be particularly tough and hard for them to bite apart and chew. So she brought those specials so that I can show the school children how they use their teeth. And so now that we're to the end of that, we really are, there we go. I'm going to show you this skull, but I need to show it to you close up. So here we are. This is an otter skull, very flat, very streamlined to go through the water. Great big canines in the front, what you'd expect for an animal that has to catch and hold living, slippery water creatures. And they eat a lot of things besides just fish. You'll hear trout fishermen talk about, trout anglers talk about how awful it is to have otters because they eat all the trout. Well, they only eat all the trout if that's all there is to eat. Trout are fast fish, and otters do not like fast food. They like slow food because it's easier to catch. And that's why they eat things like frogs and crayfish a lot, is because they're easier to catch. And they actually prefer crayfish to fish. But of course, sometimes we're driven to eat fish. And they're those incisors in the front used for grooming their fur. But this is where otters really excel in the tooth department, because they have in the back what we call carnasals. I keep forgetting, my fingers are too fat for this. Carnasals. A carnasal is a tooth that overlaps another tooth below. Watch how that lower tooth disappears, with sharp edges so that they work like scissors to cut bites out of food. So this otter can catch and kill a frog with its canines and then cut the frog into bite-sized pieces with the carnasals. But wait, there's more. If you call today, you get slightly flattened molars attached to your carnasals in the back so that they can crunch up some plant food too. So otters will eat berries and fruit as well as living things. They're omnivores. All right. Now we have only one more exhibit to see in the River Journey building. But before we go and see that exhibit, it has suddenly, horrifyingly come to me that I have not shown you your ambassador animal. And I meant to show it to you when we were talking about lemurs, because it comes from Madagascar too. So
Okay, Julia,
yes.
we have several guests for the escalator, and we don't want to do it now, but we don't want to forget it.
Okay, all right. We'll do it right after this ambassador animal, because if we don't get to the last video, it's not the end of the world. It'll still be there for another time, and the exhibit will be right here when you visit. So I'm going to get this little creature out.
Oh.
She has gone sound asleep because she's been in here for so long. She's not even under her hide anymore. Come here, girl. Ouch. I have to stand up to get her because it kind of hurts to pick her up if you pick her up the wrong way. Come on, cutie pie. I need your help. Now we're going to start her out here with this camera. Does anybody recognize this creature?
Wow.
No.
Hedgehog.
Well, a hedgehog.
Hedgehog.
That is a fabulous guess,
But wrong.
because she looks just like one, doesn't she? And it's part of her name. But in truth, she's a completely different animal than a hedgehog. She's called a lesser hedgehog tenrec. That's 10 like the number between 9 and 11, and rec like when two cars run into each other, tenrec. Tenrecs are found only on Madagascar, and they are the champions of what we call speciation. They are the champions of one kind of animal dispersing into a bunch of different habitats, and over time adapting to those habitats so that they look completely different from their ancestors. Tenrecs have actually speciated into 39 different kinds of little animals. Now, this lesser hedgehog tenrec is adapted to live on the dry spiny forest floor. So she would live with the ring-tailed lemurs, but she would always seek cover on the forest floor. Now she can climb. Get a load of these claws. See how they're long and they're curved and they're hanging on to my finger? So she's a good climber. Now she can't leap about in trees, but she can climb up far enough to find shelter in a hole or a crotch of a tree. She has spines. When you come to visit, I'll let you feel her. She does feel like a hedgehog. If you can't stand to wait, go outside and find a Chinese chestnut tree and pick up one of the hulled chestnuts under the chestnut tree. And that's what she feels like. She's an insectivore. She eats insects for a living. And so I'm going to let her do that for you. I'm going to switch to the other camera, and we're going to have that awkward moment where I have to pick it up. Here you go, sweetie pie. Well, actually, no, that's a pretty good look. That's plenty close enough. Now, we feed them, routinely, we feed them what's essentially tenrec kibble. It's a commercially made for zoos and aquariums, little kibbled food that has everything she needs in it. But a girl needs a treat from time to time.
Absolutely.
And so we set aside 10 mealworms every week. We have 2 of these girls. And every week we set aside 10 mealworms for them to have over the course of the week. And this is one of hers.
Uh-huh.
Do you love the nose wrinkle when she eats that mealworm? They enjoy their mealworms immensely. Now, our tenrecs are in what we call now a state of torpor. Clearly, she's up and moving around. I picked the more alert of the 2 tenrecs to show you. Wait a minute, don't leave town yet. We're not finished. So I checked the more alert one to show you. She's not quite so sleepy. In the summertime, she would have eaten 5 mealworms by now in this length of time if I would lay them down on the table for her. Sweetie pea, look. Do you really not? Okay. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get her hide out. They are extremely sensitive to exposure from above. Here you go, girlie. She says, well, that's more like it. How do you expect me to eat in peace when something could swoop down on me and snatch me up at any moment? So 39 different kinds of them. Some of them live as our moles live, underground with big digging feet. Some live like little monkeys or squirrels, up in the treetops, leaping about with long, strong hind legs. Some of them have skunk stripes that warn of quills. Now, I told you that these quills are sharp and kind of make you pay attention, but they won't stick in your skin like porcupine quills, but some tenrecs quills will. And they have black and white contrasting stripes in their fur to warn predators that they're about to get poked. So tenrecs have speciated into all sorts of different habitats and yet are found only on Madagascar. And that book I mentioned, Song of the Dodo by David Quammen, has a whole chapter on tenrecs and a researcher working in Madagascar on them. and all the different niches, all the different job descriptions that they hold. Oh, what are their enemies? Anything that can take them unawares. They have soft bellies. See this soft tenrec belly? And so if anything can get underneath and flip them, they're goners, just like a porcupine. So anything bigger than they are, a ringtail lemur would eat one of these if they could find them. All right. Why don't I give you, first of all, let's hear some guesses on the escalator.
Okay. I have a whole range of numbers. The longest one from Michelle Faust is 10 minutes.
Okay.
The shortest one from Patty Cloy is 2.5 minutes. And then, I'm sorry, 2 minutes from Randy Jackson, and another one, 12 minutes from Randy Jackson. I guess he gets 2 guesses. Julie Ferguson was 8. Neil Gaston was 6. Paul Clark was 7. Bill Villa was 4. And I think that's all of them.
Wow. Is everybody here retired, or are some of you on your lunch break? Because you all have really learned how to kick back and take things slow. Oh my gosh. It doesn't take nearly that long. You're not going to have to be that patient. To get from the lobby to the 4th floor takes 63 seconds.
Oh, wow.
1 minute and 3 seconds.
So all of us, as they say, overbid.
Well, but it's so funny. Right now we're spacing people on that escalator. And so we have to make small talk at the bottom of the escalator to entertain until it's your turn to step onto the escalator. And so I'll often ask people to guess, how long does it take? And I get kids who say 30 seconds, and you can just see people with their hair laid back going up the escalator. All right, we're running short on time. My hosts, would you prefer questions, or would you like to see the River Giants exhibit?
I was going to see if Michelle or Scott have offered any suggestion on that.
And while we're waiting to get that in, I'd like to thank Wit and Wisdom for your extraordinary generosity. For this program, your group made a hefty donation to the aquarium that is much appreciated and will be put to very good use taking care of these animals. We thank you.
Well, with all the effort you've expended here, it's really our pleasure to have done that. That's for sure.
All right, so what are we doing? Questions or River Giants?
Judging from the responses here, River Giant is the vote.
All right, let's get on with it then. And here we go. So this is, Lori Beth, how many gallons was the Gulf of Mexico as River Giants? Is it 35? 88? 88,000 gallons of fresh water. It's been a long time since I had to do a dive show there. And it's completely different from all of our other exhibits, because our other exhibits are all habitats that actually occur somewhere in the world. And then we populate that habitat with the animals that live there. In River Giants, we have made a generic exhibit, a generic freshwater exhibit. And they're not really swimming backwards, I'm doing that. And in it, we have put fish that grow to longer than 6 feet, with the exception of the giant gourami, which we can talk about later if you want to. And the reason we did this is because we wanted the exhibit to tell a story. Some of the fish that you see here are the arapaima. Both of these are arapaimas from the Amazon River. Here is a white sturgeon, which is a fish in our Pacific Northwest. So the story we wanted to tell is that the loss of biodiversity keeps these fish out in nature from growing to their full potential. Between water pollution and dams and overfishing, the biodiversity, not just of these fish, but of the animals that they eat, these animals are no longer seen out in nature in this adult size. So we hope you'll remember that. And here's a hardworking diver taking care of the exhibit for us, scrubbing that artificial log. So these fish come from all over the world. I am going to run it back just one time because this is something you need to know if you're an aquarium fan, a home aquarium fan. This animal is a red-tailed catfish. You see, it's about the size of our female adult diver. These animals are sold in pet stores for home aquaria. And if you take good care of your fish, it's going to seriously outgrow your aquarium. And then you're going to call us and say, can you take my red-tailed catfish? And we're going to have to say, no, I'm so sorry. We've had 2 other calls this week and we're already full with red-tailed catfish. So that's the pet trade is another thing to keep an eye on. Here's a giant whiptail ray coming over that log.
Oh, rays were freshwater.
And you're going to get to see them eat soon. So here are our divers. And they are feeding. Okay, that fish in the foreground is a Pangasius catfish. I hope, hard to tell from a striped catfish. They're very similar. It's one or the other. Feeding that white sturgeon. So a sturgeon is another fish with its mouth on the bottom of its body and its fins down low on its body, a very primitive fish. Most of its skeleton is made of cartilage, just like a shark. So here's the dive gear of the divers who are going to take care of this exhibit for us today, and the food that they're going to feed to the fish. This is farm-raised trout and some squid here. And this is an exhibit where it's safe for the divers to go in, and they're feeding. Here's gel food. You've met that before. Silver sides, clam, and shrimp. And the divers go in and feed because we have bottom-feeding fish, like the sturgeon with its mouth on the bottom of its body, who have to be fed by hand at the bottom. These are the canisters that the divers use to take seafood down. The trick is these membranes, these rubber membranes that they can push their hands into and take out one piece of food or a few pieces of food at a time. But the fish who are trying to steal from them can't get their heads in. So there he is feeding that sturgeon again. The whiptail rays down here patiently waiting their turn. Here comes a lake sturgeon. He just got his piece of food and took a face full of bubbles from the diver. And I think this is one last sturgeon. That's a lake sturgeon. And that allows you to see how he can push his mouth out into a hose-shaped apparatus. And he uses that to suck food off the bottom when he's living out in nature and to suck food off the diver's hand here at the aquarium. And this is a familiar sight to you, the whiptail ray, just much bigger than those marine stingrays that you saw earlier. Remember, these are all freshwater fish. So there are freshwater stingrays, and some of them get quite large.
See that?
Someone asked, what is the common water temperature here?
For river giants,
Yes.
I don't know. Would you like me to guess?
Your guess would be better than ours, I suspect.
I'm gonna say between 75 and 80 degrees.
Okay.
Because well, no, you know what? I'm gonna say between 70 and 75 because some of these fish are tropical, but not all of them. And guess what? Some of them are trained. So now you're gonna see the arapaima training. We train our arapaima, at least we're trying, to swim into a stretcher. So you see the stretcher deployed in the exhibit here. And this is Rachel, and she's reinforcing that arapaima for putting his head over the stretcher. He's really not doing a very good job because he came in from the side. We want them to swim in from the end so that in the end, we could swim one onto the stretcher and lift it out of the water to be moved to another exhibit or for medical care. And this is to have the fish accustomed to swimming into this device and being handled is so much less stressful than having a fish rodeo and going in and catching them, which would not even be safe for the people doing it because these fish weigh 200 to 250 pounds and they are pure muscle. They are muscle covered with fish scales and they can hurt you.
Yeah, I bet they can.
So he's getting a lot of reinforcement for being in the correct position in that stretcher. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the tour for today. Now, let me remind you, we have blasted through this in 2 hours. It takes to see all of the buildings 3 if you don't read many signs. So there's lots more to see here. We've just scratched the surface. All righty, well.
It's wonderful. You are so full of knowledge.
Well, as you
For one so young.
as you all well know, that when you get to be our age, if you've been awake a certain number of hours a day and paying attention and reading books and watching television and using the internet, you'll learn some stuff. You can't help it. And it's fun, isn't it?
It is.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that applause. Any temperatures?
Appreciated.
Any temperatures? I'm reading that that question. Any other questions while we have a moment? And let me say in advance, they're not supposed to cut us off, but if they do, thank you. Au revoir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I personally look forward to coming.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it a whole lot. We
You all are
appreciate it.
so welcome. We're glad you came. Thank you for this experience from me too. All righty, I'm going to call it and end the meeting. Remember, it has been recorded, and I'll send that link to Scott and Jack or somebody else that they tell me to.
You're going to upload it to Dropbox?
I think I'm going to do something different, but we can talk about that between us.
No, that's fine. Whatever.
Just enough to scare me, Jack.
No.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.